I'd just like to thank yourself, Kevin, the rest of the Premier Radio Digital team for having us on. It's a great privilege and a pleasure to be here. I'd also like to say good afternoon to those who have joined us on this conference. I'm Des Stewart, co-founder of Good to Give, and when I looked at the title "No Plate, No Problem," I thought, yeah, it's extremely apt for this time. The thing is there is no plates, and for many of the organizations that we work with, churches up and down the country, there actually is a problem because they're not able to receive the donations in the way that they used to receive the donations. And to that end, those churches, those charities who put themselves in a position of being able to embrace technology early enough will certainly have realized the upside. Unfortunately, there are those who have waited too late, but that's why, events like this are so super important, because it's an opportunity to really spread the knowledge so that we can have no plate, no problem. So great title. So I've spent many years in the corporate arena working in and around the city, companies like Man Group, Lehman Brothers, and so on. So my expertise is in technology and finance, and spent a lot of time working around BSI 9001, 2000, in terms of writing policies for companies and so on. I also have a unique view as well, and certainly a unique viewpoint in terms of the church and my upbringing in the church. My mother was a pastor, now a bishop, for many years of service, and my father was a deacon. So from a very young age, for a very, very young boy, I've been able to see the unique challenges that as a pastor, as a leader within a church, that you are likely to face. And to that end, that's how Good to Give was born. Taking a combination of those skill sets through technology and the view from the church, and actually bridging that together to provide, if you like, a set of services that our churches can certainly benefit from. And today we're obviously looking at the financial aspects, and what I want to do is I want to sort of set some groundwork that as churches, charities out there, faith groups that are deemed best practice. So that's what I'll be looking at in the first instance, how you get your foundations right in respect of wanting to raise the types of funds that, even Kevin moments ago was just talking about. The second part of this presentation from Good to Give will be getting yourself fundraising ready, and my head of fundraising, Dominic Pinnock, who you will meet in a moment, will actually take you through that, and it will certainly be interesting. So we've spoken a little bit more about Good to Give, just to let you know that in terms of the services that we provide, it's everything from accounting and financial controls, charity compliance, which includes the registering of charities, and certainly compliance work around governing documents and legal forms. Often I will give seminars on those things. GDPR, and also gift aid maximization. In fact, one of the very first periods that you need to be looking at when it comes to fundraising. In actual fact, we started with gift aid, and in essence, our gift aid offering is something that, like I say, when it comes to fundraising, you ought to be looking there first, but I will certainly touch on that later. And also we actually have a fundraising area. In fact, it's funny, one of the things that Kevin spoke about moments ago was our churches not necessarily being given the types of support, or believing that the support that's out there isn't necessarily enough. And I can certainly concur with that, by way of the conversations that I've also had with ministers. One of the things that a minister was talking to me about more recently was the fact that as the church, we need to make sure that there is no vacuum, albeit that COVID has come around and the church doors are not open as they used to be. we cannot allow we cannot allow there to be a vacuum, and that vacuum is only not going to be there if we have the funds relevant to make sure that we are still about and able to serve the community. All right, so our aim is to try and get you fundraising ready through the services that we provide, and as such, we aim to help you develop a roadmap to allow you to be able to maximize on your full fundraising potential. To that end, I know Pete mentioned about at the end of the session there'll be an option for you to hang around and to be able to speak with myself and Dom as to exactly what that means and what the actual roadmap may look like. Okay, so as I said, we look after quite a few churches up and down the country at this moment, over 400. So again, not only do I have a unique insight from a young lad growing up to now, but certainly with the work that we've done over the last decade, we have been able to see, all of the challenges, lots of the challenges that churches are facing. And thankfully, we have, through the work that we're doing, we've certainly been a blessing. Okay, so I think COVID has come at COVID has come at a really weird time. In fact, there would have never been a good time for COVID to have come, but it's certainly put us to the test, and it's certainly allowing us to see, are we ready for changes that not only have happened, but changes that could continue to happen. And we need to make sure that we are best prepared to be able to do that. To that end, we're here on a finance seminar, and to that end, we want to ensure that financially we are sound. We all know about the story of the parable of the master who gave his servants some talents, and how some of those servants were able to come back and demonstrate what they had done with those talents. However, one came back, and we all know the story, and had done nothing with his talent. In fact, had just stored it, came back and gave that back to his master. And his master looked at him and thought, I'm going to take this away because you haven't been diligent in your workings. To that end, we need to be good custodians of the talents that have been bestowed upon us. It's a duty on us to ensure that we're making more from what we already have. And in speaking to leaders and trustees, and I implore them regularly, but when you are given talents, which in essence is the churches that you have, the ministries that have been bestowed upon you, the members that are in that church, and the community that depends on that in essence is the very foundation. And it's how you then go and build and invest that which has been given, so that you can benefit that same community and your members from now and into the future. Remember, you never, ever stand still. You are either moving forwards or you're moving backwards. And the idea of taking a talent and having that not invested, not doing more with what you already have, is demonstration of you going backwards, and that talent will be taken away. I think through all of this, we need to make sure that when God has put something in your heart and you have developed, you have set out your church, and you are setting out this vision that has been bestowed upon you. Therein lies the initial talent. I'm a great believer in that. Everything that we have has come from God, and as such, when we are, whether it be, and our worship could be that worship where we're praying, or it be in the due diligence and the physical work, the tangible work of the church in supporting our community. I think that we need to be mindful, and we need to constantly take in our talents and investing those. And we'll talk more about how you actually invest those, because that in essence is key to us being able to build this strong foundation. So in order to do that, there are 5 key things I believe that the church needs to do to thrive financially throughout this COVID period, and certainly beyond. And one of those things is certainly to make sure that the church is financially stable. You need to ensure that you are looking at your looking at the way in which your church runs, make sure that you have, if you like, make sure that you have a stable financial footing. Okay. Point number one, make sure that you have a stable financial footing. Your trustees and your leaders need to understand financially where they are at any point in time. My own personal experience is that I've come across many an organization who do not sit down and work with budgets, don't maybe even understand budgets. You need to have an understanding of how long can we as an organization exist in the face of adversity. We're in adversity right now. The adversity is such that COVID has come around. It has changed the way giving is being done. It's changing the members. The members are no longer sitting in the pew, but they're sitting at home. You know, have we sat down and thought about what the financial impact is of less money coming into our charities? You know, we need to make sure that we can both physically and financially operate. I often talk about the physical and the financial health of any organization and its ability to be able to continue. So we need to sit down, you need to have a thought about that. You need to make sure that you know exactly where you are. Remember, your presence in the community is vital. You need to not only be here today, but you also need to be here tomorrow. And it's a point that I stress quite regularly when I speak, because we do not want to allow there to be a spiritual vacuum. And you know, it's funny, I was listening to a minister not long ago who was talking about, in these current days, if a spiritual vacuum exists, it allows other things that are not of God to come and fill that space. And I think that's where we need to be very, very mindful. We need to always make sure that we are here today and here tomorrow, so that we can continue in whatever form we are worshiping in, to make that joyful noise unto the Lord. And as such, we need to make sure that we are adopting good digital technologies in order to make sure that we can still communicate and liaise with those who are in our community, and to ensure that this joyful noise goes up, and to ensure as well that the much needed funds are still coming into our organizations. That being said, COVID has certainly tested us all. And as such, we need to consider how we're actually communicating with our members. You know, what is our digital strategy? You know, what are we doing to ensure that those who may not be able, who now can no longer come into church, can still connect with us? We also need to consider that there's a whole community out there who now, they don't walk past our churches anymore to hear us singing and praying and worshiping and think, let me be able to come inside. But we need to still create that as part of our online community, ensuring that people know that we are still here, we're still worshiping. And bear in mind, by the same token, that same community, they want to be able to support you. I think, you know, again, I refer back to what Kevin had said in respect of, we don't ask. And sometimes it's not even so much that we don't ask, it's the way in which we ask, or how easy we make it. We ran a webinar early in April, pretty much just after we'd been told to stay at home and to self-isolate and social distance. And in that, we spoke about, you know, making sure that we have tools to use in times of crisis. And we're now starting to see a lot more of the churches and so on adapting and adopting some of these online streaming, these live streams, sharing content, engaging social media. These are the things that you've got to do to make sure that you keep yourself relevant and provide simple to use online giving types of facilities, because our members and supporters actually want to give. I've come across ministers, again, who are saying to me, we're now actually seeing more people attending our services on any given Sunday or times during the week. And it's funny how a crisis can often make people turn to God, but it's a good thing. And people are attending more, But unfortunately, when it comes to giving, the giving isn't simple. And again, Kevin did touch on that. I won't reiterate. We just need to find ways in which to be able to do that. And hopefully, when we, at the end of this session, and we sit and we have a talk, I'll be able to talk about the online digital platforms that we provide. Okay. Point number 3, good governance. Okay, it's important because it speaks to the health and the strength of your charity. Ensuring that, and this is more to do with crossing T's and dotting the I's. This is what the things that I'm talking about right now, points 1 through to 5, relate to you putting yourself into the best position that you can be in, or that your church or charity can be in order for you to make sure that you are able to get the types of funding that you want to be able to get. Okay, so ensuring that you adhere to the objects that were set out in your charity's governance, in your governing document, making sure that things like the spending that you are doing is in line with those very same objects. There's many times, again, where clients of ours actually get something laid on their heart and they want to support a cause or a disaster or some sort of relief, but their governing document doesn't outline in the objects that they're allowed to do that. And so to that end, they will be spending money not in line with what the charity was set up for. Make sure that you're looking through those things and making sure that those things are being managed correctly. Also ensure something as simple as this, and you'll say to yourself, well, come on, this is like teaching grandma to suck eggs. But ensuring that your annual accounts and your annual returns are filed on time with the Charities Commission, or confirmation statements with Companies House, making sure those things are done. They're simple things, but if you forget those things, they put the types of mark against you that when you start going into looking for funding, these things come up. Your trustees reports. Now, trustees reports are made up of two key things. All right, there's obviously the independent examiners element, which is the accounting part. You have the trustees report, part 1, which talks about the governance and risk and making sure that you are compliant. But I say add other things into your trustee reports, like what have you been doing over the last year? All of the great work that you've done, all of the communities that you were able to affect, get those things into your accounts documents. Because whenever you go for funding, grant makers, funders, they want to see your annual accounts. Why not show them a whole picture of what you have been doing? Point 4, which is really a real key point. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. I said at the top of the presentation that gift aid should be the very first place that you go to maximize on the potential of your charity, provided you are registered with HMRC for gift aid. And if you are getting donations from the public, from individuals who are UK income taxpayers, they have the ability to increase your charity's income by up to 25%. And from year to year, the next stat I'm going to give you does change slightly, but typically, and hear this, there is up to £750 million per annum of unclaimed gift aid. Up to £750 million worth of unclaimed gift aid per annum. Now, that's staggering, but it becomes even more staggering because for those of you who are claiming and know, or and some of you may not, you can actually claim gift aid retrospectively for up to 4 years in the past. That actually means if you take that 750 million and multiply that by 4, you're looking at £3 billion worth of gift aid unclaimed every year. Now, when asking for donations and asking for it in the right way and asking for it correctly, you should also be asking for those same donors. If you are a UK income taxpayer, please tick that box, that declaration that allows us to be able to claim. Once a donor meets that criteria, they can happily tick that box, allowing your church or your charity to actually be able to claim gift aid. Now, that for me is got to be the first place that we are looking. Again, when I go back to the talents And the idea of having a talent and doing nothing with it, for those who are not claiming, you're hiding your talent. For those of you who are not maximizing on the gift aid potential, you're hiding that talent. And there's something, there's a scripture that says, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And it's true, because for all of us that are working and paying tax through PAYE, or self-employed and still paying tax through PAYE, but outside of an actual company, we are giving unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. But by the same token, Caesar has said, look, I'm happy to give that tax which you have received in donations and of no benefit to you personally, but the church's benefit or the charity's benefiting, I'm happy to give that percentage of it back. And if we are not doing something about that, then we are hiding our talents. The other thing that many charities are not utilizing at the moment, and since 2012, 2013, was something that, again, the government came out with, something called the Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme. An absolutely fantastic scheme that allows charities that are utilizing the traditional gift aid method, that which I've just sort of mentioned moments ago, but allows those charities to be able to claim on donations for which they have no evidence of the actual giving, provided the donation is £30 or less. They can actually claim gift aid on those donations. Now, in the session at the end, I'll happily take questions and sort of talk about how that actually works. But there is a relationship between the Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme and that of the traditional scheme, and they must both be run side by side. But the Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme can allow you to claim on up to £2,000 per annum, or sorry, claim on up to £8,000 per annum, of which £2,000, 25% of that is what you would be able to claim back. These are absolutely fantastic ways of being able to ensure that you are maximizing on what God has initially given you, which is that first offering, of which many of your donors are likely to be UK income tax payers. And that is a huge benefit and should be the very first place that you go to when you start thinking about fundraising. Okay. Lastly is actually point 5. And point 5 really is a culmination of points 1 through to 4 that I've actually discussed. The things that are tangible things that get you either grant ready, bid ready, and making sure that your organization has a firm foundation so that as bids are being written and applications are being put in, you have your documents and your things already in order. At this point, I'm actually going to introduce Dominic to discuss how point 5 actually works in terms of getting fit for funding. Dominic? Okay. Let's see.
Des, I think you need to stop sharing. It's not doing it again there, please.
No problem. I will stop sharing for you. There you go, Dominic.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Now I'm going to have to cut back on my minutes slightly so that I keep in with the schedule I've been informed. However, I'm not going to sacrifice the quality within that. I'm going to still give you the very same presentation. So I shall start my stopwatch now and with you. Right, so my name is Dominic Pinnock. I'm the head of fundraising with Good to Give. I've got many years experience, 30 years experience, in fact, a little bit more of funding and bid writing. I actually started when I was 17 doing funding applications. And I would say that was inspired through God, because it wasn't something that I'd even trained for at the time. And so I've been very successful helping many organisations of all types to secure charitable funds from a number of different sources, whether it's National Lottery, as it says there, Lloyds Bank Foundation, Henry Smith, so many different ones. Funding opportunities available now that we're in COVID. I think, as Des said, as Kevin said, and Pete, there are many opportunities now available. Even though we're in crisis, it's important that churches are very much, and charities become very much aware of what the landscape is like out there and how to access funding. The first thing that I always say to potential clients is take a deep breath, relax, and focus. Now, just a simple thing, it says Google search, and people will think, why Google search? That's a bit obvious, but it is Google search. You can put whatever your ideas are for projects, whatever support that you need into there, and it will give you some type of providers of grant funding. There's also the interest-free loans, those type of things. Not something that I would actually advise people to go down that route. And as mentioned earlier, you've got the National Lottery, which is a major one. And the National Lottery, even though it's a major one, the success rate for applications is actually very low. We're talking about 20% success rate, whilst in my experience, if you prepare well for an application and you've got the right support, it really does enhance your chances. Doesn't guarantee it, but it enhances it. Trusts and foundations, there's hundreds, say thousands of trusts and foundations. It's just about matching, I guess, the shape of your organisation, of your church, of your charity, with the right provider of funding. The Church Urban Fund, I haven't seen any funding as yet that is specific to, that is a response to COVID-19, but I'm keeping my eyes peeled on that one there. Procurement, registering with one of the procurement hubs or portals, that can be very important as well, because if you do that, it does open up your possible opportunities. Those will be sent directly to your emails, and it's just a source of income that I think is very much untapped by churches. So just thinking about reshaping and remodeling. So how to identify the right funder for you? Because that when churches come to me, a lot of the time, it's like, well, I really don't know where to go, and I don't know how to do it. Well, you have to have a good idea of what your priorities are and what the priorities are of the funders, because if you don't, then the likelihood of getting funding is going to be slim. So matching criteria and having evidence, especially primary-based evidence, which is questionnaires showing you've done your own consultations. Are you speaking to your congregations and reporting that information and keeping it in such a manner that is accessible and that you can access it and include it in applications? Always look at deadlines. I always say there's no point going for funding. If you just hear about it today and the deadline's tomorrow, the chances are is that you're going to submit an application that is under par, that's not going to be the right quality, and so you could be wasting your time. And looking at the fund, so that's also looking at the funding period. Does the funding period match the requirements of whatever it is that you want that funding for? So there's no point applying for funding that is for 6 months when really for you to really deliver a project effectively, it's going to take you 2 years. How to obtain funding, very important now. This is during the COVID-19 crisis. We've already mentioned about remodeling. It's important that you look at your structure. How are you built? Looking at changing the services, how you actually deliver them in such a way, just like we're doing the Zoom the Zoom session now. We have to be doing that, looking at IT, a lot of things that might be alien to a lot of churches, and looking how can we still maintain contact, and at the same time how we can be responsive to what is happening now. So we've got to be current, because this is a time of opportunity for definite. The amount of people, Des mentioned it just a while ago, who are turning to God, they're asking questions, they're open. We need to be funding ready. And the best way to be funding ready is to look inwardly at yourself. Policies, procedures, governance. I can speak more in depthly at the end in the question and answer session about that. And we need to be forward thinking, because it's not just about now. On the other side of COVID-19, we're going to be dealing with a lot of issues. It could be to do with poverty, mental health, well-being, faith, all of that. I've already said consider your structure and consider the competition. When you're going for applications for funding, we can't fool ourselves. You're competing with others. So at the same time, look at maybe there could be partnership working. Know what's happening in your area. Know your field. As a church, you will need a clear vision of what you want to achieve before trying to apply for funding. If you don't know what you want to achieve, then how can you expect a funder is going to know what you want to achieve? Collated evidence of what that need is. Churches across the country are doing loads of good work, but a lot of times it's not recorded in the right way, it's not kept. And if we don't have it, we can lose it. You know, when you've got a good idea, you don't write it down, you can forget it pretty quickly. Good records of former projects and services you have delivered, that ties in with the last point. An appropriate organizational structure in place, making sure that you're ready for funding. I'll say more about that in the questions and answers. A good level of community awareness. The church is part of the community is part of the church. Know what's going on so that you can be as responsive as possible. Financial management, a biggie one. And a lot of churches right now would say, what finances? There's no real finances to manage, but that's another issue. The appropriate level of capacity to successfully complete good quality funding bids. This is why so many churches right now are knocking on our door and seeking help for funding applications, because there may be the skills there may be the experience, but it's about having the capacity to push forward with multiple applications, and also to putting in the rest of the other services like gift aid, looking at the governance type of management of things as well. Require additional support from us. Book a complimentary consultation with one of our good to give charity advisors. The link is there. This is being recorded, so that's all you have to do, and then we will take it over from then. Connect with us online. Here's our website there. We've got our Twitter, Facebook, and we've got all our contact details there. Now, I know I rushed through a bit there, and I was looking at Pete to the right side of me thinking, gosh, I better hurry. So I have finished, completed. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. Well, we're going to move straight over to Redina now, who is going to talk with us in a moment. Redina, I think you need to turn your video on. And thank you very much to Des and Dominic, and do pick up that offer with them to kind of go and talk later with them. But I'm going to hand straight over to Redina, and she's got time now to share her presentation, or to share some thoughts and insights from consultancy.
Hello, my name is Redina Kulanetsi. I have been a fundraising consultant for over 20 years. It's interesting, I started my journey with stewardship, and one of the things I did for several years in the late 90s and early 2000s was providing stewardship education for local churches. And I developed a number of resources that were used in churches sort of nationwide. And then when I look at the church today, I realized that somehow that knowledge went somewhere, but has been kind of lost and forgotten. So For some churches, you know, probably they've put the right systems in place and they've encouraged their congregations to give generously, so they're doing well at the moment. But a number of churches are having difficulties because they have not perhaps taken on board the right teaching, or they were found unprepared, not just from the management and the governments and the practical side of giving, but from the teaching and encouraging of their congregation members to be generous givers to the church as well. So I will briefly share some perspectives, and I'll invite you. I've just created a Facebook group called the Church Generosity Collective UK. So I will use that group as a way of disseminating a lot of resources, ideas, and materials that hopefully can help churches to grow generous stewards in their congregation. You see, I prefer to talk about church stewardship rather than church and fundraising. Fundraising is a part of stewardship, but I think in the local church, we are encouraging people to be disciples, and as part of that discipleship, giving is really a key part of the discipleship process. So what I have noticed in the last sort of 6 or 8 weeks, one of the things I saw is the church is kind of going all digital to serve the community, to serve people, to serve their congregations. And while they went all digital, they actually forget to invite their congregation members, to invite them in this act of serving. So is the church leader who is doing the serving from their home? Is the worship leader with his guitar? Is the guy who arranges the streaming and the videos and everything else? But where is the congregation? Is it just sitting back in their homes and they're receiving all this wonderful teaching? You know, giving is part of worship. Giving is part of joining together as a church, as a community, to serve God's kingdom, to share the mission, of God. We have to serve the local people. Through our gifts, we are serving the local community. We are serving everybody else. A lot of churches organize these 30, 40-minute services, and they shied away from asking. They shied away from including, you know, an invitation to support the church, to support the work of the church through those services. The question is why. I know the answer because I have been in this field for over 26 years trying to reverse the trend. The answer is because so many church leaders operate with a sacred, secular divide mentality. They think God has called them to serve, to teach, to preach, to do wonderful things for Him. And by the way, raising the money to do all these things, well, that's a bit of secular job. That's what we do once a year when we preach a stewardship sermon. That's what the treasurer does when they stand up and say something about the church needing money to pay its bills. So operating out of this mentality, they don't really see giving and encouraging people to give as an integral part of their stewardship, of their discipleship education in the church, of encouraging people to really be great followers of God. Also, during the lockdown, the church leaders went wrong in assuming that because we are in lockdown, people don't have money to give. I know that there are projections that charities could be struggling, but at the moment, I work with 5 or 6 Christian charities, and I have connections with a lot more others. And my clients are thriving. We are raising hundreds of thousands of pounds through appeals to Christians, to members of your congregation. These people are giving generously because we are sharing with them a compelling story about a need and an opportunity for them to actually help meet this need. While we stay at home, most of us Christians, okay, I know some people lost their jobs, and in some settings, maybe it is not right for the church to put extra sort of giving requests on some of the beneficiaries or people who are part of the community. But on the whole, a lot of middle-class Christians, and I'm sorry for using that word, but here we have it. We didn't commute to London. I live in Colchester. I go to London 3 times a week. So I have extra money I'm not using for my commute. We didn't spend so much in our shopping. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't use our cars. So actually people had a bit more, and still have extra income to give. And actually they gave it to organizations or to causes that really touched their hearts. The church often wasn't in that space because the church shied away and felt oh, we can't possibly ask people. We can't possibly ask people to be sacrificial. Well, think of the story of the poor widow in the Gospel of Mark. Why did Jesus actually make that widow stand out? She stands out because she gave all that she had. Now, if there had been a church leader there with Jesus, he would have gone to say, oh, please don't give this money because you need it to eat, you need it to provide for yourself. No, she gave it all to God in an act of generosity, in an act of worship. And Jesus commended this woman. She is in the scriptures because of her generosity. What happens often in the local church is that people tend to give the widow's mite, but not with the widow's spirit. While other people actually have that spirit, but we never tap into that. We never encourage those people to support the work of the church. And the church was generally unprepared. Why? Because we expected people to come to the church, so they would receive the bulletin with a notice with information. We expected them to come to the church, so the plate would be there. I have spoken to a number of my friends who are Baptist ministers, because as it happens, I have a master's degree in theology from Spurgeon's College, so I have strong connections in the Baptist world. And several of them said, actually, our directories were out of date. We don't have email addresses of our members. Our giving pages don't really have, lots of churches had websites, but no giving pages. And even if there is a give button there with a simple form, that form has no story. There is nothing there to actually inspire and encourage somebody to make a gift to the church. It's almost, I looked at various websites and yes, the virtual church is thriving and we have pictures of all kinds of things and videos and more videos. And then at the end of the menu, there is a little button that says, make an offering. And when you click on that button, it's just the CAF form with nothing, not even a thank you at the end of that button. So why would we expect people to give when we actually even haven't created a basic environment for that to happen? So, I could go on and on with a list of things that went right. But again, I think some of these issues are technical. Some of those have to do with the basic paradigm that runs in the minds of so many church leaders who don't really see promoting of biblical teaching in their congregations, who don't really see themselves as the ones who are also responsible for encouraging their congregation members to grow in the grace of giving. The deeper problem that needs to be addressed, whether the church stays forever online or goes back to the buildings, is how can we grow generous stewards in the local church? What can we put in place to actually encourage every congregation members to journey with the church? Kevin would be familiar with the idea of supporter journeys. A lot of Christian charities and secular ones as well talk about supporter journeys, talk about stewardship, talk about getting somebody to walk into an organization and then creating a set of tailored communications that actually look like a conversation between the organization and the supporter, so that supporters can stay engaged with the organization for the long time, so that they can give, so that they can continue to pray, so that they can go to different places and serve in fulfilling God's mission. Now, the church lacks this, and yet the church is the place that has the most powerful relationships between the leaders and the congregation, because it's a community that gathers, again, whether in one place or online, every Sunday. Charities don't have this, maybe Premier does because of radio broadcasts, but any other charity hasn't got this privilege of meeting their donors every Sunday or even 2 or 3 times a week. And yet the church wastes the opportunity to invest in the lives of its people because they think, well, they should surely give because we are the church. They know what we are doing. They know what we are about. So why are they not giving to us? Now, if you are a church leader listening to this, let me remind you that your average congregation member probably listens to about or engages with probably 1,000 advertising messages every day. We see adverts everywhere, on TV, on our phones, before we turn, before we watch something on Netflix, or when we drive, or when we go out. There are all these messages that actually are vying for our attention, telling us, congregation members, what to do with our money, how to use our money. So put this into perspective. 1,000 plus messages a day that actually help or encourage people to think of their identity as consumers, and one church message a year that encourages church members to think of their identity as stewards. So is it no wonder that the church is struggling? It is struggling because it is not really encouraging people to see themselves for who they truly are in God. It is not teaching, it is not training them to actually fulfill this purpose with their lives, to grow as generous givers. I often, when I talk about, okay, what is the biggest secret? And if we were in a room, you could see people's eyes just sort of, flickering when they think, oh, what is the secret of growing money, of growing giving to the church? The secret is growing generous donors. If we look through the scriptures, and we don't have time, but think of Genesis 1 and 2. What is at the beginning of the Bible? What does God say? He created the man and the woman, and he gave them dominion over all the earth. He entrusted them with the earth and everything in it. Our first part of our identity as children of God is stewards of God's world. We look throughout the Old Testament in passages like Deuteronomy 15, and we discover that as God's children, we are stewards of relationships. We are stewards of justice, stewards of love, stewards of care for the poor and for those who are suffering. God calls us to be responsible for the welfare of others. And we look in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, and we discover that we are stewards of the gospel. We have been entrusted with the mysteries of the gospel. 3 aspects of our identity are there. And in the scriptures, if you look, there are hundreds of verses, thousands of verses that actually speak about our identity as stewards of God's word, of God's world, of the word, of the gospel, of relationships, of time, of skills, of everything. There is so much for the church leader to actually absorb themselves, take it on upon themselves, but also to use to encourage their congregations. There are no shortcuts. I mean, as a fundraiser, I know, I agree with Des and Dominic. There are times and places where, yes, we're looking for funding for projects. We want to extend the tent. We want to serve. So we look for external funding to actually help us do more. But ultimately, even that external funding doesn't last for more than 3 or 5 years. If the church doesn't grow giving from the inside to actually continue to serve in the world, then it will always be, looking for money elsewhere, always trying to fill the gap, always trying, to create this tension. So what I want to offer very briefly, and again, I would like to offer the opportunity later to sort of share more in the future, is just some simple ways of what church leaders can do now to actually grow generosity inside the church. First of all, as you probably have noted, is preaching and teaching about different aspects of what it means to be a generous steward. I would encourage, when we do stewardship campaigns for churches, I sit with the church leader and we create a plan of maybe 10 or 15 sermons in the course of a year where they can promote different aspects of stewardship. And I tell to them, look, if we try to grow generosity, it's like encouraging people to become prayer warriors. Nobody becomes a prayer warrior overnight. Well, maybe just very few people who have, that sort of special anointing. But most people fall in love with prayer and learn how to pray because they go to prayer conferences, because they take time to pray, because they have got a coach or a mentor or a small group where they can nurture this gift of praying. The same is true of giving. You cannot grow generous givers overnight. You have to start the journey from somewhere. So the first place to start is teaching. The second place is to get people to exercise their giving muscles is to actually encourage them to practice generosity so that they grow in the grace of giving. So whether it is online or offline, think about how I'm going to encourage my congregation members to give generously, what opportunities I'll put to them. You know, we think in one color, in black and white. The church needs more money, our budget is in the red, we have a gap of 5,700 or 26,000. Please, can you give some more to fill this gap? Now, I want you to think differently about this. Look at the church, the ministries that the church does. What is your church all about? You know, if you say our ministries are, you know, to teach, to engage with new people, for example, with online engagement, we are getting new people to listen to our sermons or to our services online. Now, what are we going to do with these new people? Do we need some extra funding, or do we need some funding from the budget to actually get 1 or 2 house group leaders to start conversations with these people? What is the discipleship path for this group, and how much will it cost? Your church has commitment to mission agencies or to missionaries in different parts of the world, to those who are out there, even in the midst of COVID-19, you know, sharing God's hope and God's love. So how are you going to keep those commitments? So get the stories from those people and share them with your congregation in those moments when you are talking about giving and generosity. Think about, you know, even the beloved church building. We are speaking now like buildings are terrible. I actually love the church building. When I walk into some old churches and cathedrals, you get a sense of people having prayed there for generations. A peace, a place for thinking, for reflecting, for drawing closer to God. So, you know, try and say to, especially to your committed church members, to those who have been part of your community for a long time, look, we are not meeting in the building, but that is still our home. That is still part of who we are. You know, will you make a gift? Will you increase your monthly gift by 20 or 30 pounds so that we can continue to keep our home in a good shape? So many of us spend the lockdown time painting and decorating our houses, and the longest line on Monday was at IKEA somewhere. So in a sense, people understand when we say for God's house, for the love of God's house, will you increase your support to the church? So take different activities, different streams of your ministry, and pull a good story for each ministry's team. And with that story, have a call to action that actually inspires your congregation members to participate through their giving. And do so in a joyful way. I'm going to turn my pages. I'm a person who likes to write stuff. Show people what difference are the gifts that people are giving. What difference are they making? We are putting all this creativity, again, in filming sermons and in filming whatever music. How about making a tiny film or encouraging 5 people, you know, get your missionaries on Zoom, get them to maybe do a little talk, get some of your congregation members or people who have benefited from your church to just speak during those services, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just to share a story. Get people to share stories of how they've been generous to their neighbors and people in the local community, so that they own this generosity. It becomes a collective act. It becomes what you and your church are together. And say thank you. This is another area where the church is not good at, because again, we operate out of the assumption that, well, you're just giving to the church, we can send you a dry and cerebral letter. Now the church, whether it likes it or not, is in competition for funding with mission agencies, with Christian charities, and secular charities as well. And some of those charities know how to thank well, how to thank creatively, and how to thank with authenticity. So it is upon you to actually be the kind of church who thanks people, who really inspires, who encourages, who appreciates people for what they do. I don't think paper is dead, you know, even with paper communications. For some of the people, maybe the older members of your congregation who have been giving for 20 years, when you look at the church finances, just go and buy some cards and send them all a thank you note written by the minister or by somebody else in the leadership team. Thank you, Mrs. Smith, for being a generous supporter of our church over the last 20 years. Everything the church has done, couldn't have done without you. You have helped run the children's club. You have helped to support, our work in Africa. You have helped to create this new ministry group amongst young people in our community. Our church, we love you. We wish you well. We pray for you, and send those cards out. And then you will see how people who will really value that appreciation actually increase their giving, because they want to love you back. So, encourage also, if you're looking at your church finances and your church situation and your membership, get also something in place for your new members to encourage them to give generously, and to give generously as they join the church. Again, perhaps some denominational churches do this better, but a lot of churches don't. They just assume that new members, by sitting there, by being around, by being welcome, then somehow they'll give generously. So set up those direct debits or those ways, whichever you choose to do them, and actually make a little bit of that stewardship education as part of the induction of a new member into your congregation, and share with them, this is what our church is doing. This is what it's achieving. By giving to our church, you will participate in making this, and this possible, and in helping us. At this special time as well, and this is one of sort of my last comment, is emphasize growth in giving. Because some churches, we are where we are. Maybe we lost money from using the church building or something else, like the church hall that we were renting out. So there is now a bigger gap. So to those people in your congregation who are mature Christians, ask them to consider, to prayerfully, to increase their support for the church. And put this again in a context of a sermon, or in a context of, you can even write a nice, as a minister, a nice letter to them saying, we grow spiritually, we grow in faithfulness to God. Today I want to ask you to grow in sacrifice by thinking about increasing your support to the church, and then provide ways for them to do so. Digital is great, but if I would still say, even with paper, we are sending out hundreds of thousands of pieces of direct mail, and people are still responding to direct mail. It is a bit slower, but the money is coming in. Some of these people who have very strong habits, it's very hard to get them to break the habits and try to do something with a QR code. I mean, I've worked in this field for, 30 years. I'm intelligent. I still don't know how to use a QR code, and neither am I interested in using it. But if you gave me another way to give, then I will actually give. So try and do the things that are convenient to your donors, not necessarily the things that are just convenient to you. So I think, how am I time-wise, Pete? I have no idea. Okay. So I will stop here, but if you get to join the Church Generosity Collective, then we can continue these conversations, because I genuinely believe it's really important for teaching and encouragement and practical help to be given to this church at this time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Radina. And are you staying on afterwards as well with
Yes,
Des and Dominic? Yeah, that's great. Good. So we've got about 4 minutes for Q&A, because I really want to bring on our Bible teaching towards the end of our conversation this afternoon. So there are a couple of questions that are out there. Des, jump in with Karen's question. People may think that the church is rich and not in need of funds. So you said you wanted to answer that one? Go for it.
No, in actual fact, really, yeah, no problem. I think sometimes it's the way that the church portrays itself in so much as, and I guess when people look at the bigger churches like your Church of England and the Roman Catholic, who have lots of legacies and things like that, then yes, those churches certainly are very, very wealthy. But I think what it is there needs to be more openness about how the church is necessarily spending its money. The fact that the church does have its outgoings, and so therefore it does need income. Things like AGMs, and telling everybody very clearly in their annual general meetings what we're spending that money on. And just making it clear to donors throughout the course of the year, the programs that you're doing, the missionaries that you have overseas. I think, running your church is very much like running a household. If you don't necessarily have the right amount of money coming in, you're not going to be able to buy the things that you need to buy for your household. And the church is very much the same, but you've got to let your parishioners and your members and those who support you know exactly what's happening in your church and what you're spending that on.
Great. Thank you very much. How about this other question about gift aid? As an anonymous attendee, strange name and surname, I'm considering using an outside company to claim gift aid, but I'm worried about offending the volunteers who are currently doing it. Do you want to say that, Des or Dominic?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You tend to find that there is often an emotional connection, and I think Radina alluded to the fact that all acts within the church are still part and parcel of worship. So those who are volunteering to help with gift aid and so on, that's part and parcel of their method of worship. However, if it's working well, then great. But no doubt, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, who's mentioned that, sees some value and understands the mundanity of the task which managing gift aid is. And also, if you spend time speaking with me, you'll understand why many churches don't maximize, because unfortunately, volunteers or even some who class themselves as professionals don't necessarily look in all of the corners that they ought to be looking to help the church maximize. This question is no doubt born out of the fact that there is an opportunity that is not being seized on within that particular local church, and I can honestly say you do get what you pay for. So part of the service that we provide actually has maximization at the very heart of it, and will ensure that certainly our clients are claiming as much as sort of 80 and 90% of the potential, just because of what we do through gift aid small donation scheme and the traditional gift aid over the 4-year retrospective claiming period. And it's certainly part of an ongoing conversation I'm happy to have.
Brilliant. Can I switch over to Radina for this last question, please? Is that okay? Radina, somebody's just put on, I work for a Christian charity. What would you say to non-Christians who think that we should offer our services for free because we're Christian?
So this is the way how we serve communities, but also we make a living out of this. We support our families and everything else. And often we use discernment, that, for example, if somebody is really in very difficult situations, if I can't help a small charity, then I can direct them to maybe another organization that could help them. There are organizations that could work pro bono and actually support. Yeah, but at the same time, I would also say to them, look, even if you make a small contribution, this is your way of honoring us and what we are offering to you and helping you. So, yeah,
that's great. Thank you. So thank you so much to the speakers, and really looking forward to seeing you in the after show as well. First time we've done a kind of after show, but that's really good. So we're going to switch over now to Singapore, to Pak Lai, who is the principal of who's the principal of Bible Graduate School for Theology over there, and Pak Wai is going to share a little bit from the Bible and some Bible teaching to end our webinar in this part, and then we'll come back, and if people need to leave, that's fine. But hand over now to Pak Wai in Singapore.
Greetings from tropical Singapore. I am Pak Lai, principal of the Biblical Graduate School of Theology in Singapore. Now, Don Flo, the founder of Flo Automotive, once spoke about the role of money for businesses in this way. He said, money is like blood to a human being. Just as a human being cannot live without sufficient blood, so also a company cannot flourish without money. Yet, just as a human being would not wake up every day to say that I will live for my blood, so also should a company's goal and focus not be on mere money making. What Flo says here, I think, applies very well to the relationship between the church or Christian ministry and money. The goal and vision of the church is to love Christ, and money is but a means to that end. This being said, money is an important means, because without it, our ministries can hemorrhage and die, which is why churches and parachurches struggle all the time with how much attention and effort to devote to our ministry vis-a-vis to fundraising. And it is necessary to struggle, I think, because failure to struggle may well mean that we have lost sight of that intricate balance between ministry and money. A friend of mine sits on the board of a Catholic order, and she laments that she can have any number of conversations on financial matters, but can hardly interest anyone to chat about ministry. Perhaps because of this, the order now has difficulties getting new recruits, despite having substantial financial resources. It is a far cry from its 16th century roots, where the founder managed to win 7,000 members in just a few years. And so when the balance is lost, mission drift kicks in, and the ministry dies slowly but unknowingly. Holding on to these spiritual ideals are far from easy, especially during our times. While businesses hope that the economy will swiftly rebound from recession, chances are things will not look good financially in the next 2 or 3 years. If you are in the airline, travel, retail, or office property sectors, for example, you may well be reeling from the economic devastation for several years to come. Now, in times like this, it is easy to focus on how much we have lost, how much difficulties we have yet to bear in the months ahead. Now, this being said, we also remember how far the Church of Christ had come, despite the enormous difficulties that the apostles and the early Christians had to bear with. We need only put ourselves in the shoes of the Apostle Paul to imagine this. When he first left Antioch for Asia Minor, reaching as far off to Macedonia and also Corinth, he was practically alone with very little resources, if any. Now, his lack was not only financial, it was also cultural and social, because everywhere he went, he encountered Greco-Roman idolatry. And the Jews, they were disdained often as a minority. And to make things worse, even the Jews themselves were rejecting and persecuting Paul. So given these bleak circumstances, how much more should he have despaired? How much worse is he from our present situation? But look at the fruits of his labor. 13 of his letters have now become the word of God for 2.5 million people worldwide. And the gospel he preached, now it has been transforming far more lives in the last 2,000 years. And so not in his wildest dreams can Paul imagine what God could do through his faithful ministry. So the question is, what did it take for Paul to remain faithful through all these difficulties? Well, I think 3 things. The first is a clear vision of what he was called to do, to be the apostle to the Gentiles, to preach the glorious news of our Lord Jesus Christ. And Paul could differentiate between what matters and what does not, what are essential services and what are not. He never suffered from mission drift. Now, the second is the conviction well expressed in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. We know this story very well. In the midst of his ministry, Paul was tormented by a thorn in the flesh. Now, scholars have argued endlessly as to what this thorn means. What is it? Now, all we know is that the pain was so long drawn and excruciating that the apostle would plead 3 times to Christ for it to be taken away. But what he got from Christ instead were these words: "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weaknesses." Now, hearing this, Paul responded by saying, "Therefore, I would boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest upon me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, I am strong." Now, in January, I suffered 2 to 3 weeks from a very serious infection that required surgery in the end. And like Paul, I prayed earnestly for Christ to remove the pain. I can tell you that I was hardly close to saying those triumphant words that Paul said. So what I've realized since then is that it took tremendous spiritual freedom for Paul to say those words. To be able to say that my faith in Christ is not about how Christ would provide for me or deliver me according to my own human expectations. Rather, it is to trust that God will fulfill the goodness He has planned for us through whatever circumstances He is putting us through now. Even if it means that we sometimes will experience pains, hurts, and unanswered prayers. Now, this COVID-19 pandemic and the financial meltdown that comes with it will bring a lot of pain. Nevertheless, God is still in control. He is still bringing to pass the purposes and the goodness that He has planned for His people and His creation. But the question is, do we have the spiritual freedom to bear with the troubles, to endure the difficulties, trusting that God will see us through eventually? Now, this brings us to my third and final point. The spiritual freedom to trust God does not mean sitting around passively. Rather, it means paying attention to what is happening around us, what advice we are getting from our mentors, our friends, our communities, and how God is speaking to us daily so as to discern our steps ahead. Now, there are two parts to this discernment. To discern what we must give up in order that we can receive what God has in store for us. This may mean a career change, a change in our businesses, or in our organizational assumptions, or even our lifestyles. But it also means discerning what or who we must take on board to facilitate that change. What new subjects or disciplines we have to learn, who do we invite to join our ministry, whether as a donor or as an employee, or how we should restructure our businesses and ministries. Now, as we discern daily, we lean on the confidence that the Spirit of the living God will guide us. The Paracletos will always be here to comfort us. This, however, is only possible if we have the freedom to let go of what we are comfortable with and be ready to see what God has in store for us for our future. Let us pray. Our dear Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for loving us, for guiding us by your Holy Spirit. And so as you face the uncertainties and storms ahead, grant us faith to trust in your provision, the freedom to follow your lead, and the ability to discern so that we can know you more intimately, love you more intensely, and follow you more closely. Amen.
Well, thank you very much to Pakwa from Singapore, who closed with a prayer there. So that brings to our kind of formal end to today. So thank you very much. We're going to have the after party or the conversation afterwards. Do remind you that next week is the Digital Church Beyond Lockdown, and Heidi and John and Olive Drain and VTJ from Singapore, who is a worth listening to, will be coming along to share with us. And John Drain will be closing with the Bible reflection at the end of that. So fantastic seminar to follow on from this fantastic seminar. But now I'll just put some closing music on, and if you need to leave us, thank you so much for coming. Do consider becoming a member so you can get all of these seminars as they roll out into the future and take us beyond into the new normal. And take up that offer of the youth and children work digital magazine as well. Trouble with my own words there. Thank you very much, and it's been good to see you. See you next week, I hope.
So yeah, please do hang around if you've got any questions. We're really happy to try and answer anything that might be on your mind. You might have a really specific question. You might not know how to, I don't know, take a car payment, or it could be something more theological about how you reconcile asking for money. Whatever it is your question, if you want to hang around, and feel free to put that in the Q&A box now, and we'll do our best to help you.
I thought I was going to slide, but it hasn't gone there. Well, hello and welcome to the after party. I see that quite a few people have stayed over with us. And so let's open up the questions. So perhaps if the speakers could come off mute. So Des, Dominic and Radina, if you could come off mute, and Kevin as well.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, is everyone there? Good.
Yeah.
And then if there are questions that people would like to ask. Panelists, I'm more than happy to open up the chat function to attendees. Are you happy for that?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, so they can kind of use their microphones if they want to.
Okay, so there was one question has come in already.
Yeah, go for it.
So the question is, how does a charity go about registering? How does a church go about registering a charity and obtaining a charity number? That's very easy. You come to us at Good to Give and we'll take care of it all for you. That's the easiest answer. But outside of that, the first thing I always do when I talk to churches or any faith groups that actually want to register a charity, the first thing I want to do is to make sure that what you are setting out to do cannot be achieved by you joining somebody else, lending your energies and your and maybe what finances you might have, and actually finding somebody else who shares the same vision that you do. And that's the first thing that I always go into, because as far as the Charities Commission is concerned, depending on which region you are part of, whether that be whether you're a charity in Scotland, so Oscar is the charity that you'd want to register with, or England and Wales being the Charities Commission, or up in Ireland, you know, the last thing that they want is a charity starting today and ending tomorrow because it hadn't necessarily thought about, you know, what I spoke about earlier, being the health and the strength of the charity, being that you have the physical strength to actually go out and meet the objectives that you've set for yourself, or that you have the financial strength, i.e. the money that would be coming into your charity. And again, Radina was absolutely right. You know, you need to be looking at how you are able to sustain from within, because wherever you go outside, that's only going to be for a period of time. So that's pretty key. But so if you can't find somebody to align with, and often you find that the vision that has been put on your heart is slightly different and stops you from working with other people that have maybe a similar vision, then okay, you would have set out your stall and God's laid it on your heart and that's what you want to do. So it's about making sure that you have good governance. You need to look at you need to look at the legal form that you are going to adopt, and there's various legal forms out there. The legal form, which is, are you going to be a company limited by guarantee with no share capital? Are you going to be a charitable incorporated organization? Or are you going to use one of the unincorporated types of organization? And again, this is part of a much longer conversation that I would have with you. But depending on, regardless of which one of those you choose, you would then have to choose the correct governing document that is going to underpin the type of organization that you are going to be. So it's really understanding the legal form that you're going to adopt, the governing document that is going to underpin that legal form. And then just making sure that you've got the right number of trustees. The minimum is 3. And these trustees should really be people who are going to add real tangible value to your charity, not just individuals who are just coming along for the ride and don't share the same vision as you. These have got to be people or individuals who will question why we're going to do this thing, and in the real best interest of the charity. You must ensure that there's no conflicts of interest. And, like I said, this conversation really does go on, and I'm happy to continue this conversation offline. But those are the fundamental things that you would want to look at.
Great. Kevin, do you want to kind of pick up that question that you and Les are having?
Yeah, so Les has been posting in the chat about how you might add a giving button effectively to a website, and I was just sort of interacting there on a few different points. So there's always a number of options on how to do things. The simplest way, if you have very limited technical expertise or you need to do something very quickly, would be to get on a third-party giving platform. So, for example, something like Stewardship or CAF. Stewardship is a Christian-run organisation, and you can register as a church or charity there, and they will set up a giving page for you, which you can direct people to. So then all you really need to be able to do is to put a link onto your website. Just technically get the button on there and point people across to somewhere else. It could be that maybe you host it on WordPress or some other platforms, where actually there are some plugins for using taking to payments directly in Stripe, for example. Stripe is a credit card payment and debit card payment processor, incredibly easy to implement with a little bit of technical knowledge, but it's a step above using a third-party system. I'd also just say as well that, again, if you're not wanting to use something like Stewardship or CAF or one of the online giving platforms, you could also, for direct debits, use something like Go Cardless. Go Cardless will process your direct debit donations for a fee, of course, but they make it very, very easy. So as always, it kind of depends how much work you're able to do and are prepared to do yourself. But there are plug and play options at one end, and there are other options which maybe you can integrate yourself if you want to take that route.
I mean, I would also add, because I see some of my clients using DonorBox. So if you just Google DonorBox, I like the layout of DonorBox and the fact that actually when you look at the giving form, then you have, you can change the amounts, but you have different buttons. It's much more visible than sometimes, like, for example, with CAF, it's okay, but it looks clunky on the page, and it takes a little bit of intuition when you think, if I press the button, does it look like it's a button or whatever? So, that's not, again, it's not very expensive. They just take a small percentage, and you can set up DonorBox for general giving, but you also can set it up as another page for project giving. For example, give for our new church building, or give to support our youth work, or give to support another aspect of the work of the church. So you could have, give people various sort of opportunities to support you by just putting up this really simple, easy to use landing pages.
Can I just add to that? It'll be very, very quick. I mean, again, we're a technology-based company, and the idea behind that is that we try to, where the churches or organization that we work with are not necessarily as technically equipped, we're actually able to bridge that gap and provide such facilities as, again, being able to do online donations and the management of gift aid, to which there are reporting tools, whether or not we're managing your gift aid through the envelope system, bank payments, online donations for an online donation tool, again very similar to the likes that yourself, Dina, and Kevin have sort of discussed. But it's a tool that's within the microcosm of your your actual church, so you guys actually control it yourself. And we also have a digital application, which is a phone app. It will soon be on the iStore, but it's on at the Google Play Store at the moment for you to be able to download. And that's not just, it's not just about, again, being able to get donations and manage that through to gift aid, but it's also a communicative piece where you're able to liaise and talk to your members. Again, Dina, you sort of mentioned that. How are you talking to your donors and keeping them abreast of the things that you're doing, and sort of two-way conversations? So again, a part of a much wider and longer conversation. It's something that we're happy for people to discuss.
And do these things, so Jonathan, do you want to say, you want to raise your own question rather than me read it out?
We specifically use Xero for our accounting software, and the trustees have said, come back to us and said, well, is there something that would link directly into our accounting software rather than having to use a third-party system?
I think
as a button for on the website, that is. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So I'm not personally aware, because I've never used Xero, that it can actually, but I'm not aware that it can host the donation form itself. I know you can pay invoices through it, but others may be aware of that. My comment on integration, which might be helpful, is that there's a tool called Zapier, and I'll post that into the chat for you. I don't know if you've ever come across this.
Yeah.
And what that means is that, for example, if you take a donation in a certain platform, even if it's in Stripe, or it's something you plug into WordPress or Shopify or wherever it is that you've kind of had the transaction take place, you can use a tool like Zapier, really easy to sort of then push that transaction into Xero. So that's one potential option if you can't quite find a way of using Xero to take the donation. You can basically push all the donations directly in there in real time as they happen using Zapier. Other panelists might have other thoughts on that.
Des, can you just outline what you're offering about this free consultation?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that we came up, well, as outlined in the service, or in the beginning of my presentation, I spoke about the services that we provide, and I think it's really I think it's how you talk to your clients that best gets your clients to understand what you're really delivering. Are you just delivering accounts, or are you just delivering gift aid services? No, we're trying to get our clients to be the best clients they can be. And I certainly I identified, it resonated with me, some of what Radina was talking about in respects of how you actually talk to your clients and their communities. And what we aim to do is to get the clients from being where they are now and looking at, well, where do you need to be? If the purpose that you've been given is put here to deliver the message, God's message, and to save souls for the kingdom, then in essence, you need to look at where you need to be to make that happen. So, you will want to grow your church. You'll want to, there are things that you're going to need, whether or not that's going to be a church building, whether it's buy or rent or whatever. And how do we get you into a position to make you as fundraising ready as you can be? And this is where we take all of our services and create, if you like, by way of consultation, a roadmap for our clients. So we come across clients who maybe have delivered accounts late in the past, which isn't a good look when you go to funders, because that says to them straight away that potentially your compliance isn't in order. We look at a client, we look at maybe clients who, like you say, they want to achieve maybe great things, but they haven't necessarily got all of their governance in place by way of risk policies, and they're not looking at conflicts of interest because maybe they've got several family members as part of the trustees, and we look at all of those things there and say, right, what do we need to do to get you into a position of being the best that you can be to attract the type of funding you want? So the idea for us is to sit down across the services pieces that we have and actually develop a roadmap for those clients and actually take them through that roadmap. And we understand that it's not a one size fits all. because some churches will come in and they've got pretty much the full gambit, just missing one bit, and some need it all. So that's basically what we do. There's a roadmap that we build for that client, and then work with that client throughout that period to get them to a position where then, you know, the likes of Dominic can actually take them and really help them to get the types of additional funding that is going to help make a difference in certain areas.
Good. Thank you. And Radina, what kind of services do you offer, and how do people get in contact with you?
Yes. I offer fundraising, obviously, consultancy services. So I work with Christian charities, help them to develop their strategy. Often people call me when they say, "Oh, we have no money," and then you go in and you realize that the problem is not so much money; is that they don't have a case for support. You know, they don't know, they don't have clarity to where they are going. They haven't really mined their database to actually see who are their faithful supporters. You know, they have no supporter journeys for their people, and often their communications are what I call organization centric or ministry centric. It's all about we, and very little you. People join a cause, they give to something because they feel that it is about them. It is what God has called them to do. It is, you know, I try to meditate your donor's mission. They are not here to fund your mission as you're being you the leader, the organization of the church, but the other way around. Just, you know, share the stories, align what you are doing with what these people want to see happening in the world, invite them to be real partners for your cause. So in this process, I offer training and coaching, and I also create fundraising campaigns, mostly for Christian charities, but I work on occasions with churches as well to help them develop what I call stewardship campaigns. So the church looks at its finances, looks at the gaps, and then tries to think, okay, what kind of teaching, what kind of, you know, inspiration. So while Des and Dominic are the ones who do the technical thing, you know, I couldn't do governance or think about the intricacies of gift aid and everything else. That, you know, obviously these things need to be in place. I go in and say, look, you as leaders, how will you nurture? How will you inspire? How will you encourage members of your congregation to give more to God's work? So, you know, I help sort of the preaching and teaching strategy and activities to put in place. But I would add, you know, because often charities and especially churches think we want to work on a shoestring, and yes, we can find volunteers to do stuff. Just take note of what these guys do and talk to them and help, you know, put the foundations right from this practical perspective, because that's where there is a lot of energy drained and things that go wrong and, you know, accounts that don't look right. And these things can really bring sort of big minuses and build distrust between your congregation members and the church. And if the church, you know, members can't trust you, then they won't give. So, you know, don't think, oh, we are going to spend money. This could be money well spent to actually help you focus on the things you should focus to grow and develop in the future.
Right. I think Kevin has to go, don't you? So just want to say wave bye, Kevin.
Yeah, I've got to go. Sorry. Love to see you all. Thanks for joining in today, and I hope to see you at the next one. Bye.
Brilliant.
Okay.
And it's been good to have Les asking a number of questions through this afternoon. So, Dominic, you haven't said anything for a while.
No.
So, how would you respond about this kind of feeling about a lot of Les is saying a lot of his. Les, are you there? Do you want to say something, or do you want to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? All right, right. So yeah, a larger portion of our church members are pensioners, right? In their 80s, most of them, and they're not comfortable with things like online banking, using the internet, and so on. So in this lockdown period that we're experiencing at the moment, they're holding on to their giving until we can all congregate again. Others, you have a few members who are afraid of using online banking. Can you think of a way around this issue? Any advice on that?
Well, one thing that I would say, I think Des Des spoke on it earlier on, is that I know at Good to Give, one of our roles is actually equipping churches with facilities, but that also can be expanded to the congregations, to elderly people in the community, vulnerable people, to try and ease the levels of isolation. I'll give an example of something that we're actually working on right now, where we'll be providing, we're aiming to provide tablets to that are pre-programmed, and they've got our SDM team that will be helping to provide that extra support so that people who are isolated out there, especially the elderly, can actually use these tablets to keep in contact with each other, to access very specific support for whatever their needs are, because there'll be all types of links on there that are easy to access. So what that type of does, it builds their confidence levels around actually using tech, because right now that remote type of support is one of the safest ways of engaging. So it's in short, in terms of what they can do with the monies, I think on that side of things, I think Des would be more qualified maybe to talk about the ways that they can store the money that they would usually be contributing to the churches.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that in some right. So we're talking about, I mean, the first category, hi Les, the first category of person you spoke about was, you know, those who are of sort of pension age and, you know, probably not au fait with technology. I mean, my dad, you know, he's 83. And we've been trying to teach him how to use a mobile since he was about 63. So there's no chance. And when he presses a button, he presses about 4 or 5 of them all at the same time. So, you know, his donations over this COVID period, to be honest with you, they're just going to have to sit in an envelope until such time as he gets back to church, because it's just not gonna happen. Whereas on the other hand, you have those who are of the older generation who are more mobile and upwardly mobile. So my mother, who is 80, who, you know, you can't actually stop her from using her mobile. So she's, you know, so she's pretty happy to sort of make donations. But I think traditionally, and again, I keep referring back to Radina, she mentioned the fact that I think it was her, or maybe it was actually Kevin, who just said, look, there are some people who are just not going to take on new ways of being able to donate just because they are happy and comfortable with the way they donate. And there's really very little that you can do about that. However, what we found, and this was again through conversations with our clients, and when we were developing our digital app, clients actually came up with some of the same things that you mentioned, Les, earlier, in that they don't feel comfortable with using an app, or using a donation button or something that's just been put somewhere, and they feel that the integrity behind that might be somewhat dodgy, to coin a better phrase. So what we did was we developed our app, our donation app, that a member joins the app. So you download the app off the Google Store, or the Play Store. You install it on your phone or your tablet, and that's what Dominic there was referring to in regards to the tablet. And when he mentioned SDM, we have a service delivery management team that are there to provide that level of support. But they download the app. Now, once they've downloaded it, they then have to wait for somebody in the church administrative team to allow them on. So they actually come on, see their request to be part of this, if you like, this microcosm, which is the church. And all communications are purely just between the church members and the administrative team or the senior pastor. And what we found with our clients that are now starting to use this is that they actually feel a lot safer, because they know that not anyone just from outside can just join in. It's something that is specific to the church. So even as you get new people that want to join up, then in essence the same thing happens. So yes, it sort of answers the question of people being you know, feeling a bit more comfortable with the way in which it works.
I mean, I would still say with some of these people, you know, if you have, say, 50 or 60 of these members, even at a basic level, just write a nice letter to them or a nice card, you know, include a reply envelope with the address of the church or the address of the treasurer and a postage stamp, and encourage them to send the check through.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
we
Practical.
have church. This has been a difficult time for us all because they are committed givers. That age and that generation gives to the institution. They are not necessarily so much concerned about the mission, you know, or the stories. They have given faithfully. They will continue to give faithfully. So just say, you know, we love to hear how you are. We have prayed for you. Send them just a little word of encouragement and say, we need your help because we are continuing, you know, to pay for the church. The church hasn't, we are in lockdown, but we haven't stopped. So, you know, please include the check with your offerings for the church. Feel comfortable whenever it's good for you to post it. I see, I mean, I live on an estate in Colchester and people are going out, even elderly people, you know, early in the morning, they put their masks on, they go to Sainsbury's. So on the way to the shop, unless some of these people are housebound, you have to use your judgment in terms of, you know, where it's appropriate, where it's not. If these people are frail, don't do that because you might be putting them at risk and of forcing them to go out. But the reason for we as charities, you know, often we send reminder appeals to constituencies. You know, a Christian charity will send a letter. 5 weeks later, we send a second letter. We do extremely well with the second letter. And you know, the people who respond are these older people because they feel responsible for giving. You know, they feel, oh, I forgot to give to that, so I'll make sure I do. So the desire is there. Just, you know, if you need the money now, try and do this. If you think, okay, we can survive because we have reserves, and they will keep, you know, they'll start giving later on. Maybe when you get to visit people, or you know, they might meet together in some mini church group of 5 or 6 people when, you know, lockdown continues to ease. Because I love digital, but at the same time, I think church doesn't have to be the whole congregation. They could be 4 church members meeting together and praying and doing a mini Bible study, and that's church. So maybe you can facilitate this in the future for older people.
I tell you, Redina, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have clients even now who members are posting donations in, and so those donations are coming through the post. And what's happening is then our clients are putting together all of those donation envelopes and they're sending them to us for processing. So it certainly is happening. The mail system works. It's probably, in fact, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I actually prefer to send a letter than I do an email, because an email, you look at it and you think, oh, I'll come back to that, but the letter stays on your desk until you answer it.
Thousands of unread emails.
Get it?
Excellent.
You know what I mean, the generic one.
Oh, yeah, I understand. I'll be sending you an email, so don't make sure mine doesn't go to the bottom of your pile.
Excellent. Well, it's been really good to be able to kind of answer these further questions afterwards. I've put the final link there to the Good to Give Premier offer of the consultation, everything, and Redina, your messages there as well. But I would just like to say thank you so much to Des and Dominic, to Redina, to our attendees as well. Thank you to Charlotte, who's been doing the tech behind the scenes and everything, make sure everything's all right, and to Pakwa and Kevin as well. But I think we're going to have to end it there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a good time with you all.
Okay, God bless you all. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, so do click that button if you want to before we go, and get that free consultation. And come back next week for our digital church into the future or beyond lockdown.
I'll definitely promote you guys. So
thank you.
Bless.
Bye.
Bye bye everybody. God bless.
God bless you. Bye bye.
Yes.